Since the start of President Trump's second term, prediction markets have gone from a niche industry to a financial juggernaut. Before the 2024 election, prediction markets like Kalshi and Polymarket had a weekly trading volume around $50 million. Today, that number has grown more than 100-fold, with $6 billion traded per week. But as the traffic has grown, so has the controversy. The Senate has unanimously voted to ban its members and staff from participating in prediction markets amid mounting concerns of insider trading. That ban follows a series of alarming cases, including a U.S. soldier accused of using classified information to make hundreds of thousands of dollars betting on the capture of Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro. And Kalshi, which already prohibits bets on military strikes, has taken several steps to go after insider trading, most recently fining 3 candidates who wagered on their own elections. But several lawmakers argue that the organizations need to be regulated further. Senators Kirsten Gillibrand, a Democrat, and Dave McCormick, a Republican, are introducing a bill to ban trading by members of the executive branch. That includes the president. While several Democrats are pushing to ban bets altogether on elections, sports, military, and government actions. Joining us now to talk all about this is former commissioner of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, Brian Quintenz. He also serves as a Kalshi board member. Brian, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
This is a conversation that we're all excited to have. I want to start off with just kind of taking stock of the regulatory landscape and Kalshi's posture towards it. Because, you know, when in my conversations in recent weeks with leaders of financial institutions who are running more traditional markets built on traditional infrastructure, but are already using prediction markets as sort of data sources, the one thing that they say is the key to sort of unlocking that next step to the partnership with prediction markets is achieving some sort of regulatory framework, something that is clearer. Last night, you posted in support of the legislation from Gillibrand and McCormick. That legislation that may or may not pass would empower the CFTC to ban prediction market bets on war, violence, terrorism, and other acts that are contrary to the public interest. But in the meantime, who is primarily responsible for policing prediction markets?
Yeah, thank you, Jack. It's great to be with you this morning. Thanks for having me. I think it's important to take a step back and say, you know, what is a prediction market? It's exactly like the stock market, except instead of trading on stocks, you're trading on real-world outcomes. And just like the stock market, Kalshi is a federally regulated venue. And just like stocks, these are legal financial instruments. So there is already a very significant regulatory structure that is adjudicated by the CFTC for prediction markets because they are regulated as financial derivative exchanges. And so Kalshi, like others that are in the federally regulated space, I can't speak to the offshore markets because I think a lot of the things you're describing in terms of insider trading and other kinds of activity are occurring in an unregulated venues. Kalshi already takes a lot of steps, including the steps provided for in this bill, should it become law, to provide a market with integrity, to ban insiders from trading, to ensure that members of Congress that don't have or that have access to confidential information are not participating in our markets, because it's incumbent upon a federally regulated exchange to provide a market with integrity.
But who is stopping someone who's working on this show, for example, who's working on questions with us to, let's say one of our producers goes and says, you know what, Eugene's going to ask Brian Quintenz this maybe. Yeah. It ends up being right because they helped create the template that we're using. Only one person, apparently, the CFTC has prosecuted a case of insider trading when it comes to this. You guys have a surveillance team, monitors potential insider trading. The team is about 20 people. And to date, Kalshi has only fined and banned 5 users for insider trading. And it just feels like, knowing humans, it's hard to believe that there's only 5 cases. So are you guys actually catching all of the things as they're happening?
So I'd say a couple things to that. The first is that I know, I can't speak to how many, but I know that there are a lot of ongoing investigations by Kalshi into ensuring that people that are participating in the markets or that have participated in the markets aren't doing so illegally or illicitly. The second thing is that when you talk about insider trading and manipulation in derivatives markets with events, you have to make sure that anyone that can control the outcome of an event is not participating in that market. So that is an upfront surveillance mechanism that Kalshi does to ensure that there isn't manipulation.
What do people have to prove?
Well, there is a know your customer standard for Kalshi and other regulated exchanges that ensures that they know who you are, they know who you work for, your bank account is connected to your account. Okay. So that they can verify that. And if there is a market that references your job or your employment or your knowledge, they can screen for that up front. But there's also an important after-the-fact surveillance tool that they can also come in and look at and screen a lot of trades and say, this looks very suspicious, we're going to investigate that further.
What do you say to people, maybe like myself, who think that tech companies should not be allowed to regulate themselves, that Congress needs to pass these bills and pass them quickly?
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
In fact, Kalshi does, like other derivatives markets, like the Intercontinental Exchange and like the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, Kalshi does have self-regulatory obligations that it has to meet provided by federal statute. But the CFTC is the regulator of these markets, of onshore federally licensed markets. You know, it's the offshore markets that are unregulated, that are doing things that are unethical and illegal that I think are a different question.
The proposed legislation that you're in support of would ban members and their staff. But what about family members? Shouldn't that ban extend to the family members of staff? To your point about the upfront surveillance, do you surveil, say, because I'm not a gambling person, but let's say I go home and I tell my husband, you know, this is what we're doing tomorrow and this is how it's going to go down, and then he goes to Kalshi and makes a bet. Is there any plausible way to do that kind of surveillance?
Or friends. Or just friends.
Sure.
Just friends.
Absolutely. And we have a team that does that looks for social media connections, for instance, or relationships or similar household status, right? And to your point, you know, this bill that was introduced and this rule that was just passed by the full Senate to ban senators themselves from participating in prediction markets, Kalshi already does that. And they go further. They ban employees. They ban legislative staff from trading. They ban government employees from trading. And in terms of family members, I think there's a fine line to walk from a preemptive standpoint so that we're not getting into a debanking controversy, so to speak. But there is a lot of focus on what those people will do if they are in the markets and surveil them after the fact and bring charges if they're doing something illegally.
I want to actually play a moment. There was a lot of talk about prediction markets on Capitol Hill this week, all around. I want to play a moment that happened between Elizabeth Warren and Pete Hegseth on the need to prosecute alleged insider trading on Iran war bets.
You're saying you're not paying any attention to this insider trading. Is that what you're telling me? That you've paid no attention to this? You haven't noticed it? You haven't done anything about it?
What I'm saying is we're focused on our mission of executing for the American people, and what happens in markets is not, in betting markets is not something we're involved in.
What happens in betting markets doesn't matter to you, even if the information may be coming from insiders in your office?
Senator, it's not something we're involved in at all. And of course, we take operational security at every level very seriously. In fact, no one's taken operational security more seriously than us.
What's your response to that? Do cabinet leaders need to be more forceful or aware of this sort of new environment and implement rules outside of potential legislation?
Well, I had a problem with I couldn't exactly hear the quote, but I had seen something around it. From what I knew,
it basically said we're not involved in it at all.
Yeah. Well, so I don't think it's his responsibility. I think it's a market regulator's responsibility. I think his job is to prepare war fighters. It is the CFTC's job and other market regulators to ensure that they are requiring exchanges like ours to screen out military officials or members of the military or government officials from trading on this information, and that is exactly what Kalshi does.
Brian, really quickly, we definitely have to go, but I do, there's a tweet from your CEO, 90 minutes left to attempt generational wealth. The odds are not zero, and it's free. You owe it to your grandchildren. The idea is that you can do this and there's no problem. Do you think that Kalshi owes it to its users to warn bettors about the addictive nature of what's happening here? Because we've heard story after story about how people's real lives are impacted by it. They're losing the shirts.
I think there are two very important issues there. The first is that Kalshi is not a casino. It is a federal marketplace. And you are not betting against a house. You are engaging in market activity. So the revenues of Kalshi are not equal to the losses of its customers, like in a casino. Mm-hmm. But the second thing is that, yes, we're seeing a lot of financial activity that is becoming more prevalent across society that people are struggling with from an addictive capacity. And there are tools that Kalshi is now employing, like deposit limits, self-exclusion, and even partnering with a firm for counseling if people need help around addictive issues. And I think that's our responsibility.
Brian Quinten's board of Kalshi. I think this is the beginning of this conversation for us, not the end. Thank you so much.